Emma Carter stood outside a narrow workshop on a cold autumn morning, watching people hurry past without giving the little building a second glance. The faded brick walls, dusty windows, and worn wooden door made it look forgotten by the world. Most people believed that success could only begin inside expensive offices filled with modern furniture and confident professionals. They never imagined that an ordinary workshop hidden between two old buildings could become the birthplace of an extraordinary idea. Emma had heard those opinions for years, but they no longer hurt as much as they once had. She had discovered that people often judged dreams by appearances instead of possibilities. If something looked small, they assumed it would always remain small. If someone lacked money or influence, they assumed that person lacked talent as well. Experience had taught Emma that the loudest opinions were not always the wisest ones. At 29 years old, Emma lived a quiet life. During the day, she repaired household appliances for local families. Washing machines, microwaves, coffee makers, and electric fans filled her workshop every week. Customers appreciated her honesty because she preferred fixing broken machines instead of convincing people to buy new ones. Although her work paid the bills, her real passion came alive after the customers went home and silence filled the workshop. Every evening she unlocked a small storage room behind her workbench. Inside were notebooks, circuit boards, wires, tiny sensors, and dozens of unfinished prototypes. For nearly 4 years, Emma had been designing a simple device that could help families reduce unnecessary electricity consumption without changing their daily habits. She believed technology should quietly improve people's lives instead of making them more complicated. Her closest friends did not share that belief. One friend laughed whenever Emma explained the project and reminded her that enormous technology companies already controlled the market. Another suggested she stop wasting time on impossible inventions and accept a stable career with regular hours. Even some relatives advised her to think about marriage and financial security instead of chasing uncertain ambitions. Emma listened respectfully every time. She rarely defended herself because she had learned that arguments changed very few minds. Results spoke far more clearly than promises ever could. Whenever someone criticized her dream, she opened the notebook she carried everywhere and wrote down their comments. On the first page, one sentence had remained untouched since the day she began her project. Every opinion deserves attention, but not every opinion deserves control. Reading those words reminded her that criticism could become valuable information without becoming permission to surrender. One rainy afternoon, a woman named Grace Bennett entered the workshop carrying an old electric kettle wrapped carefully inside a towel. She apologized for interrupting Emma's work and explained that the kettle had belonged to her late mother. It no longer worked, yet she could not bear the thought of throwing it away because it reminded her of family breakfasts and conversations that could never happen again. Emma smiled gently before accepting the kettle. "I'll do everything I can," she said. "Some things are worth repairing because of the memories they carry." Grace thanked her warmly and glanced around the workshop while Emma examined the damaged wiring. Her attention quickly settled on a nearby table covered with unusual electronic components that clearly did not belong to ordinary customer repairs. "Are those part of another repair job?" Grace asked with genuine curiosity. Emma hesitated for a moment before answering. "No, they're part of something I've been building for a long time." Grace stepped closer instead of changing the subject. "What does it do?" Very few people had ever asked that question sincerely. Most only pretended to be interested, before offering reasons why the project would fail. Grace's expression was different. She seemed eager to understand rather than eager to judge. Emma described her invention carefully. She explained how small sensors could learn a family's daily routines and quietly reduce wasted electricity without interrupting normal life. The system would not ask users to press complicated buttons or study confusing instructions. Instead, it would work naturally in the background, helping families save money every month. Grace listened without interrupting until Emma finished. Finally, she asked softly, "Have you built a working prototype?" Emma nodded. "I have one, but it's still far from perfect. Would you mind showing it to me?" Emma opened a small cabinet beneath the workbench and carefully lifted out a simple device connected by several thin wires. It looked ordinary and unimpressive, almost disappointing to anyone expecting futuristic technology. Emma laughed quietly. "I know it doesn't look like much," Grace smiled. "The greatest inventions usually don't, at least in the beginning." Those simple words stayed in Emma's mind long after Grace left the workshop. A week later, Grace returned to collect her repaired kettle. It worked perfectly again, and she thanked Emma with obvious relief before placing a thick folder on the counter. "I thought this might interest you," Grace explained. Emma opened the folder and found customer surveys, electricity cost reports, and interviews with local families struggling to manage rising monthly bills. "I work with a community development organization," Grace continued. "Over the past few months, we've spoken to hundreds of households. Almost everyone wants an easier way to reduce energy costs without changing their entire lifestyle." Emma looked up in surprise. "You're sharing all of this with me?" Grace nodded. "I think your invention deserves real evidence instead of random opinions." That evening, Emma stayed awake long after midnight reading every page. For the first time, her dream felt connected to genuine human needs rather than personal ambition. She realized she had been thinking like an inventor when she should also be thinking like a problem solver. Successful products were not created because technology was impressive. They succeeded because they solved problems that people experienced every single day. This became another lesson she wrote inside her notebook. If you truly want to improve any skill, whether it is learning English, starting a business, or mastering a profession, begin by understanding people's needs instead of chasing perfection. Knowledge becomes valuable only when it helps someone else's life become easier. Over the following months, Emma redesigned almost everything. She removed complicated features that looked impressive during demonstrations but confused ordinary users. Every decision became guided by one simple question: would my grandmother feel comfortable using this? If the answer was no, the feature disappeared. Progress often felt painfully slow. Entire weeks passed with only one successful improvement. Some days ended with broken prototypes, software errors, and complete frustration. Yet Emma refused to measure progress by speed alone. She measured it by understanding. Every mistake revealed something that yesterday's version had failed to teach her. Many people believe that meaningful progress should happen quickly, but lasting improvement usually grows through patience and consistency. Whether you are building confidence in English or pursuing a lifelong dream, small daily improvements become extraordinary results when they are repeated over time. Success is rarely created by one dramatic moment. More often, it is built quietly through hundreds of ordinary days that nobody else notices. Nearly 6 months later, Emma received an opportunity to present her invention to a group of local investors. She owned only one business suit, purchased years earlier for a job interview that had ended in disappointment. As she entered the conference room carrying a worn backpack containing her prototype, she immediately noticed polished tables, expensive watches, and confident smiles that made her feel completely out of place. One investor glanced at the backpack and raised an eyebrow. "Is your presentation inside there?" Emma smiled politely. "Yes, it is." Another investor exchanged amused looks with his colleagues before saying, "Let's hope the invention is more impressive than the bag carrying it." Several people laughed softly. Emma ignored the comment and calmly connected her prototype to the demonstration equipment. For the next 15 minutes, she explained how her system could reduce unnecessary electricity waste while remaining simple enough for any family to use. The room remained quiet until the presentation ended. Then the questions began, and Emma realized that convincing people would require far more than believing in herself. Before I share the rest of the story, I need to know, where are you listening from? I would love to hear from you. The room fell silent after Emma finished her presentation. She looked from one investor to another, hoping someone would ask about the technology itself. Instead, the first question came from a man sitting near the end of the table. "How many customers are using your product today?" Emma answered honestly, "None yet." Another investor leaned forward. "How much revenue has your company generated?" "None." The woman beside him folded her arms. "Then why should we believe this will succeed?" Emma paused before replying. "I don't expect anyone to believe my words. I only hope you'll believe the problem I'm trying to solve." For a brief moment, nobody spoke. Finally, the oldest investor closed his notebook. "Ms. Carter, your dedication is admirable, but we invest in businesses with proven demand, not hopeful ideas." The meeting ended only a few minutes later. Emma thanked everyone politely before leaving the building. As the elevator doors closed, she finally allowed herself to breathe deeply. She had prepared for weeks, yet the entire opportunity had disappeared in less than half an hour. Outside, light rain covered the streets. Emma stood beneath the gray sky, watching strangers hurry past with umbrellas, while she quietly replayed every answer she had given. Part of her wanted to believe the investors had been unfair, but another part understood that they had asked reasonable questions. Her invention solved a real problem. What it lacked was proof. That evening, Grace visited the workshop carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate. "I heard how the meeting went," she said gently. Emma forced a smile. "It wasn't a complete disaster." Grace laughed softly. "No? They rejected me professionally." For the first time that day, Emma laughed too. After a long silence, Grace looked around the workshop. "What will you do now?" Emma stared at the unfinished prototype resting on the workbench. "I'm going to stop trying to impress investors." "What will you do instead?" "I'm going to earn the trust of ordinary people." The following week, Emma made an unexpected decision. Instead of searching for another investment meeting, she offered to install her latest prototype in 5 homes completely free of charge. "I don't want payment," she told each family. "I only want honest feedback." Some people were curious. Others were skeptical. A few politely refused because they had never heard of her before. Eventually, 5 families agreed. Emma personally installed every device, carefully explaining how it worked before leaving detailed instructions behind. Every evening, she visited at least one home to answer questions and record observations. The first few weeks were far from perfect. One system failed to recognize a family's schedule. Another accidentally switched off outdoor lights before sunset. One customer called late at night because the settings had become confusing. Emma apologized every single time. Then she returned to the workshop and searched for better solutions. She no longer viewed mistakes as signs of failure. She viewed them as directions pointing toward improvement. There is an important lesson hidden inside every mistake. Many people become discouraged because something does not work the first time. However, mistakes often teach us more than immediate success ever could. Whether you are learning English or developing a new skill, every correction brings you one step closer to confidence. After 6 weeks, something encouraging happened. One customer called Emma with unexpected excitement. "You need to come over," the woman said. Emma worried another problem had appeared. Instead, the customer handed her the latest electricity bill. It dropped by 18%. Emma smiled. "Really?" The woman nodded proudly. "And I barely changed my daily routine." That single result gave Emma more confidence than any motivational speech ever could. Soon the other families reported similar improvements. Although the numbers were different for every household, all of them were spending less on electricity than before. Encouraged by those results, Emma asked each customer for permission to share their experience publicly. Every family agreed. Within a month, local community groups began inviting Emma to explain her invention during neighborhood meetings. She never tried to sell anything. Instead, she listened carefully as families described their concerns, rising utility bills, and everyday challenges. Every conversation revealed another opportunity to improve the product. Emma filled notebook after notebook with suggestions. She simplified the installation process. She redesigned the mobile application. She made the instructions easier for older users to understand. The invention slowly became less about technology and more about helping people live comfortably without unnecessary expense. Listening became Emma's greatest advantage. Successful people do not assume they already know every answer. They remain curious, ask thoughtful questions, and continue learning throughout their journey. The willingness to listen often creates opportunities that confidence alone never could. 3 months later, nearly 60 families were using Emma's invention. One Saturday morning, Grace rushed into the workshop holding her phone. "You need to see this." Emma looked up from her workbench. "What happened?" "A local technology journalist just published an article about you." The headline read, "The woman helping families save money one home at a time." Emma read the article twice. It wasn't just about the invention. It was about trust. The journalist had interviewed several families who described Emma's honesty, patience, and determination. They praised her willingness to return whenever something went wrong, instead of disappearing after making a sale. Within days, Emma's email inbox filled with messages. Some families wanted installations. Several community organizations requested demonstrations. Even a few local businesses wanted to test her system. Among those messages was one unexpected email. It came from the same investment group that had rejected her months earlier. They wanted another meeting. Grace smiled after reading the invitation. "So, are you going?" Emma looked at the screen for several seconds before answering. "Yes, but this time I'm not asking them to believe in me." Grace smiled knowingly. "They'll have to believe the results." Emma closed her laptop and looked around the little workshop that everyone had once ignored. Nothing inside the room looked very different. The walls were still old, the windows were still dusty, the workbench was still crowded with tools and unfinished sketches. Yet everything felt different now, because Emma had discovered a powerful truth. People rarely believe a dream simply because someone describes it beautifully. They begin to believe when they see lives quietly changing because of it. When Emma walked into the same conference room a few weeks later, everything felt strangely familiar, yet completely different. The polished table was still there. The expensive suits had not changed. Even the investors sat in the same seats as before. The only difference was the way they looked at her. This time, nobody smiled politely because they felt sorry for her. Nobody questioned whether she belonged in the room. They already knew her name. The oldest investor stood up and shook her hand. "Welcome back, Ms. Carter." Emma smiled. "Thank you for inviting me." As everyone settled into their seats, the atmosphere felt calm instead of uncomfortable. One investor opened a folder filled with customer reports. "We've reviewed your recent progress," he said. "More than 60 families are using your system. Customer satisfaction is exceptionally high, and demand continues to grow." Another investor added, "Your results are impressive." Emma listened quietly. Several months earlier, she had walked into this room asking people to believe in an idea. Today, the evidence was speaking for itself. After discussing future plans, manufacturing costs, and business growth, the oldest investor finally leaned forward. "We would like to invest in your company." The words were exactly what Emma had once hoped to hear. Yet something inside her had changed. Instead of feeling overwhelmed with excitement, she asked a simple question. "If I accept your investment, will I still be free to build this company the way I believe it should be built?" The investors exchanged thoughtful glances. Finally, one of them smiled. "We're investing because of your vision, not to replace it." Only then did Emma agree. As the contracts were signed, Grace quietly watched from across the room. When the meeting ended, she hugged Emma warmly. "You did it." Emma smiled. "We did it." Grace laughed. "I only believed in you." Emma shook her head. "Sometimes that's exactly what someone needs." Over the following year, Emma's company grew faster than she had imagined. The small workshop slowly transformed into a bright office where engineers, designers, and customer support specialists worked together every day. Despite the growth, Emma refused to throw away the old wooden sign that had once hung outside her tiny repair shop. One afternoon, a new employee asked why she kept it inside the company's entrance. Emma gently touched the faded wood before answering. "Every visitor sees our success." She paused for a moment. "But this sign reminds me of the days when nobody did." The employee smiled, finally understanding. As the business expanded across several cities, Emma kept one habit that never changed. Every Monday morning, before attending meetings or reading financial reports, she spent an hour reading customer feedback. Some messages praised the product, others described problems that still needed solving. Emma welcomed every opinion. She believed that criticism was not an attack. It was an opportunity to become better. One day, an engineer apologized after making an expensive design mistake. "I've slowed the whole project down," he said nervously. Emma smiled kindly. "No." The engineer looked confused. "You've shown us something we didn't know yesterday." The room became quiet. Mistakes become failures only when we refuse to learn from them. Everyone returned to work with renewed confidence. This became part of the company's culture. Nobody was expected to be perfect. Everyone was expected to keep improving. Learning never ends. No matter how successful we become, the people who continue asking questions, accepting feedback, and improving their skills often achieve far more than those who believe they already know everything. Real confidence grows through continuous learning rather than perfect performance. Several months later, Emma received an invitation to speak at a national innovation conference. Thousands of entrepreneurs, students, and business leaders filled the auditorium. As she stepped onto the stage, bright lights illuminated the audience. For a brief moment, she remembered the quiet workshop where everything had begun. She smiled before speaking. "A few years ago, people told me my dream was too small." The audience listened carefully. "They didn't reject me because they were cruel." She paused. "They rejected me because I hadn't given them enough proof." The room became completely silent. "I stopped asking people to believe my words." She smiled warmly. "I started giving them reasons to believe." The audience applauded. After the event, a young woman approached Emma with tears in her eyes. "My family says my idea will never work." Emma recognized the fear in her voice because she had once carried the same fear herself. She placed a reassuring hand on the young woman's shoulder. "Listen carefully to advice." The young woman nodded. "But never allow someone else's doubt to become your future." Those words stayed with the young woman long after the conversation ended. As Emma left the conference hall, she looked at the evening sky and quietly reflected on the journey that had changed her life. Years earlier, she had believed success meant proving everyone wrong. Now she understood something much deeper. Success was never about winning an argument. It was about solving a problem that truly mattered. Recognition had arrived only after years of patience, discipline, and quiet determination. Every difficult day inside the little workshop had prepared her for the responsibilities she carried now. Life rarely rewards people overnight. The greatest achievements are usually built through small decisions repeated with consistency and purpose. Whether you are learning English, developing a new skill, or pursuing an ambitious dream, never underestimate the power of steady progress. One small improvement today can become the foundation of extraordinary success tomorrow. That evening, Emma locked the office and walked outside. The city lights reflected across the streets just as they had years earlier when she had left her first failed investor meeting. Everything around her had changed, yet one sentence from her old notebook still guided every decision she made. "Nobody believed me because I had not given them a reason to believe yet." Emma closed the notebook, smiled quietly, and continued walking toward the future, knowing that the greatest victories are often born during the moments when nobody believes they are possible. If you liked this story, please like, comment, and share. More simple and emotional stories are coming soon.